She was standing in front of her adobe house in northern New Mexico, just drinking a cup of tea. She remembers how huge the sky was that day, the sound of the nearby river, and the steam rising up from her mug. Then, she heard a car drive up, a door bang shut, and her husband walked around the corner. Without any warning, he told her he was having an affair and wanted a divorce. Time stopped. There was no thought, no processing, just the light and a profound, limitless stillness. And then, she regrouped, picked up a stone from the ground, and hurled it right at him. This deeply human, messy, aggressive reaction didn't come from just anyone. It came from a woman who would go on to become one of the most revered Buddhist teachers in the Western world. That woman was Pema Chödrön, and she often says that her husband saved her life that day. Because when that marriage shattered, she tried desperately to go back to some kind of comfort, some familiar resting place, but she couldn't pull it off. Instinctively, she knew that the complete annihilation of her old, clinging self was the only way forward. She eventually became a student of the renowned Tibetan master Chogyam Trungpa Rinpoche, and later the director of Gampo Abbey, a monastery in Nova Scotia where the sea and sky melt into each other, and there is nowhere to hide. Her book, When Things Fall Apart, was born from raw, unedited talks she gave over 7 years. It became wildly influential because it does not tell you how to put the pieces of your life back together. It doesn't offer you a fluffy blueprint for getting back to normal. Instead, it offers heart advice for difficult times. If you are going through a brutal breakup, if you have lost your job, if you are grieving, or if you just feel a fundamental, free-floating anxiety in your daily life, this video is for you. Because Pema is going to show us that the ground completely falling out from under us is not the end of the story. It is the beginning of a great adventure, a very tender, non-aggressive, open-ended state of affairs where true awakening actually happens. We have to start with the single most universal experience we face when our world collapses, and that is our absolute terror of the unknown. The first concept is that fear is not a mistake. It is a natural reaction to moving closer to the truth. Pema tells a story about a man in the 1960s who was determined to get rid of his negative emotions, especially his fear. His meditation teacher kept telling him to just stop struggling, but the man didn't listen. Finally, the teacher sent him to meditate alone in a tiny hut in the foothills of India. The man shut the door, lit 3 small candles, and settled down. Around midnight, he heard a noise in the corner. In the dim light, he saw a massive snake, swaying right in front of him, looking exactly like a king cobra. He was so terrified he couldn't move a muscle. All night long, he stayed totally alert, keeping his eyes locked on the snake, trapped with nothing but himself and his fear. Just before dawn, the last candle went out, and suddenly the man began to cry. But he wasn't crying in despair. He was crying out of tenderness. He suddenly felt the longing and alienation of all the animals and people in the world. He truly accepted that he was angry, jealous, and profoundly afraid. He felt so much gratitude in that total darkness that he stood up, walked toward where the snake was, bowed, and then fell sound asleep on the floor. When he woke up, the snake was gone. He never even knew if it was real or just his imagination. But it didn't matter. As he later explained, that level of extreme intimacy with fear caused all of his personal dramas to completely collapse, and the real world finally got through to him. The realization here is that we naturally dissociate from fear. We feel it coming on and we instantly check out, sweeten it up, take a pill, or distract ourselves. But brave people do not lack fear. They are just intimate with it. When you stop running away and let yourself be nailed to the present moment, you realize that the unknown is actually a deeply tender and vulnerable place. But knowing we shouldn't run from fear is one thing. What actually happens when we are confronted with something that makes us want to run? This brings us to the second core concept. The moments when we reach our absolute limit are not punishments. They are messengers telling us we are about to enter unknown territory. There is a story about Pema's teacher, Trungpa Rinpoche, when he was traveling to a monastery he had never visited before. As he and his attendants neared the gates, they saw a massive, ferocious guard dog with huge teeth and red eyes. It was growling, struggling against its chain, desperate to attack. They could see its bluish tongue and the spittle spraying from its mouth as they tried to walk past it at a distance. Suddenly, the chain broke. The dog rushed straight at them. The attendants screamed and froze in absolute terror. But Rinpoche turned and ran as fast as he could directly at the dog. The dog was so completely surprised by this reaction that it put its tail between its legs and ran away. When we reach our limit, our bodies and minds usually freeze, just like those attendants. Life suddenly corners us, and it feels like looking in a mirror and seeing a gorilla staring back. We try to angle the mirror to look a little better, but no matter what we do, we still look terrible. That is the feeling of being nailed by life, where you have zero choice except to embrace what is happening or desperately push it away. But if you can meet that edge, if you can lean toward the discomfort rather than protecting yourself from it, a hardness inside you will dissolve. When the sheer force of anger or disappointment is allowed to just be there without you solidifying it by blaming yourself or someone else, that energy actually pierces you to the heart and opens you up. The obstacle is not your enemy. It is life showing you with terrifying clarity exactly where you are stuck. And the reason we get so stuck in the first place has to do with how we view the future. The third concept is that we suffer because we are addicted to hope, and true healing requires hopelessness. Pema recalls sitting next to a man on an airplane who kept interrupting their conversation to swallow various pills. She asked him what he was taking, and he said they were tranquilizers. She asked if he was nervous about the flight. He replied, no, not right now, but he thought that when he got home he was going to be nervous. That is exactly what we all do. We grab for something because we cannot stand to face what is coming. We are deeply convinced that there is some hand to hold, some babysitter out there who will make everything okay. Hope and fear are two sides of the exact same coin. We hope that the doubt and mystery of life will eventually go away, that we will finally get some solid ground under our feet, and we fear that we won't. This endless cycle of hoping for lasting security is what Buddhism calls samsara, a hopeless, miserable cycle that just goes round and round. The ultimate truth is that suffering is inevitable as long as we believe that things last, and that we can find some permanent resting place. This means that turning your mind toward the truth does not bring security. It brings an understanding of hopelessness. The Tibetan word for this is yi tangche, which means totally, completely exhausted. It means getting totally fed up with the belief that there is somewhere better to be, or someone better to be. Renunciation isn't about giving up worldly pleasures because they are immoral. It is about renouncing the tenacious hope that you can be saved from being who you are. When you finally give up the hope that insecurity and pain can be exterminated, you can actually have the courage to relax with the groundlessness of your situation. You stop calling the babysitter to rescue you. Giving up hope is the ultimate encouragement to stick with yourself, return to the bare bones of reality, and stop resisting the fact that everything is changing all the time. But even when we accept that things change, we still get caught in the daily drama of our preferences. That leads us to the fourth concept. Our mood swings and miseries are completely driven by our attachment to the 8 worldly dharmas. These 8 dharmas are 4 pairs of opposites that run our lives. Pleasure and pain, praise and blame, fame and disgrace, and gain and loss. There is a story about a remarkable 8th century boy named Padmasambhava, who was born completely awake to the fact that phenomena have no reality. But he didn't understand how everyday human society worked. Because he was radiant, the local king took him in and treated him like a son. One day, the boy went up to the flat roof of the palace with the king's ritual instruments, a bell and a metal scepter. Delighted, he danced around and tossed them into space to see what would happen. They fell to the street and instantly killed 2 passers-by. The people were so outraged they demanded the boy be exiled into the wilderness alone. Through this vivid encounter with praise and blame, the boy figured out exactly how the world operates. He saw how people showered him with praise when he pleased them, and banished him when he caused pain. From then on, he abandoned hope and fear completely. We constantly get hooked by these same forces. Someone walks up to you and says, "You look old." If you want to look mature, you feel praised and happy. If you've been obsessing over wrinkles, you feel blamed and insulted, and a corresponding sense of pain hits you. It is the exact same event, but our subjective reality completely triggers our emotional reaction. Suddenly, out of nowhere, we feel we have lost something or been insulted, and we compose an entire novel in our heads about why someone else is so wrong and we are so right. The aha moment here is realizing that you have absolutely no control over what occurs in your life. You are just pushing and pulling a vanishing illusion. We are like children building a sandcastle, violently protecting it with shells and glass, even though we know the tide is inevitably coming in to sweep it away. When you start noticing how you get hooked by praise or loss, you develop a deep, intimate curiosity about your own mind. You stop running from pain and you stop grasping at pleasure. Which brings us to the fifth and final core concept. When we stop grasping, we are left alone with ourselves, and we must learn to rest in the middle of cool loneliness instead of running toward hot loneliness. Underneath all our talking, all our moving, and all our frantic entertaining of ourselves, there is a fundamental groundlessness that bubbles along constantly. When we feel this queasy, edgy feeling, we experience it as hot loneliness. It is restless, pregnant, and hot with the intense desire to escape and find something or someone to keep us company. We immediately want to move to the left or the right. If someone abandons us, we instantly conjure up an identity as a victim, or we righteously tell that person how messed up they are. We go wild trying to come up with companions or distractions to save us from despair. But if we refuse to seek resolution, we enter the detox center of the middle way. We begin to experience what Pema calls cool loneliness. Cool loneliness is completely turning our fearful patterns upside down. It is the willingness to be lonely without resolution. It is a state of contentment where we realize that when we have nothing to lose except the programmed fear in our guts. We stop wandering in the world of desire, looking for alternatives like a child wanting to run home to the refrigerator. We realize that we are fundamentally alone, that there is nothing anywhere to hold on to, and that this is not a problem. By relaxing with the ambiguity of loneliness, we drop our ideals of who we ought to be, and we look directly at who we are with compassion and humor. Heartache is no longer a punishment. So how do we actually live this way? How do we stop struggling and start leaning into the sharp points of our lives? Here are 3 specific, practical ways you can apply this philosophy to your life this week. First, practice the art of refraining by noticing your physical escape routes. Refraining is not about being a repressed, uptight person. It is the practice of not instantly filling up space just because there is a gap. This week, pay attention to your physical movements when you feel uncomfortable. Pema noticed that when she felt she was losing ground, she would pull her ear, scratch her nose when it didn't itch, or straighten her collar. We all make little jumpy, jittery movements when we feel anxious. Your task is not to change the movement or criticize yourself for it. Just see what you do. Notice how you habitually grab for a phone, start talking, or act out impulsively to avoid the fundamental restlessness underneath. By simply pausing for a moment instead of doing the same repetitive thing, you connect with basic spaciousness. You stop the chain reaction from escalating. Let the jittery feeling stay a minute and just wait. Second, when your mind spirals into anxiety or fantasy, mentally label it thinking with absolute kindness. We spend so much of our lives completely in another world, a world totally made of thoughts, planning, worrying, and fantasizing. When you sit quietly or find yourself zoning out, and you suddenly realize you've gone off, just say to yourself the word thinking, and return to the present moment or to your out-breath. The secret here is that you must do this with the Sanskrit concept of maitri, which means unconditional friendliness. Do not label your thoughts with a harsh, judgmental tone. Whether you are having a fantasy of rage, a daydream of true romance, or a memory that terrifies you, acknowledge it compassionately as just thinking, and let it dissolve into the big sky of your mind. You aren't trying to get rid of thoughts. You are just seeing them as dream images, recognizing they aren't solid, and giving yourself a break. Third, when you encounter pain, in yourself or in someone else, do the practice of Tunglen on the spot. We are wired to turn away from suffering. When we see a beggar, or hear about a tragedy, or feel a heavy darkness in our own stomach, we want to look away. Tunglen reverses this entirely. This week, when you feel a spike of terror, revulsion, or anger, stop and breathe it in heavily. But don't just breathe it in for yourself. Breathe it in for the millions of other people in the world who, at that exact same second, are feeling the exact same misery and stuckness that you are. Feel the kinship of that shared human pain. Then, as you breathe out, send out a feeling of cool, bright, open space. Send out relief for yourself and all those countless others. If someone at work pushes your buttons and you want to get revenge, breathe in the pain of everyone who is trapped by anger, and breathe out spaciousness to slow the situation down. This practice literally dissolves the heavy, rusty armor you have built around your heart. You stop trying to protect yourself, and you discover the genuine noble heart, the bodhicitta, that connects you to everyone. The off-center, in-between state where nothing is resolved and everything feels like it's falling apart, is not an obstacle to your life. It is the ideal, tender situation where you finally stop running and open your heart beyond limit. If this hit home for you and you want more raw, honest truths that cut through the fluff, subscribe to Page Portal right now. We bring you the realizations that hold up a mirror to your soul every single week. Leave a comment below with the fear you are choosing to finally get intimate with today. See you next time.